Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting, held in the middle school auditorium, is an open session of the Roselle Park Board of Education, the Public School Act of the state of New Jersey. Notice of this meeting was sent to the Star Ledger, the local source, the home news review, the borough clerk, school offices, and district website. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
President Miller.
Here.
Vice President Sokol. Here. Mr. Valentine.
Here.
Mr. Rockenstein. Mr. Dan.
Here.
Mr. Gerton.
Here.
Mr. Carnes. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Vita.
Here.
Mr. Carnes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please stand for the flag. Seeing there's no one else, we'll conclude.
Jacob, you have a 6-12 show in the neighborhood of Roselle Park. Ladies and gentlemen, the audience, viewing audience, members of the board, Mr. President, Mr. Rito, I'd like to welcome. I spoke to Mrs. Peters. She said she'd come back to play next year. Closed session items, personnel, full day, kindergarten, safety and security of possible improvements, attorney-client privilege, and any action taken, if any action taken. Thank you.
Seeing there's no one else for our first public participation portion of the meeting, we will close that portion. And now we're on to committee and liaison reports. Does anyone have a report? Mr. Young?
Just like to mention real quick, last Tuesday, we had our first budget meeting here. Wasn't usually attended, but the people that came had a lot of input, and we appreciated that. I did recognize all the people that did a lot of work, a lot of lights out, preparing the budget, and they worked very hard, and we came to a very good part. A lot of board members we heard that didn't know about everything, which they found out on that thing. And that's the end of my report, sir. So at this point, I'm not sure about the second meeting, correct? 22nd, but the 29th will be a referendum for the vote.
Yes, and then we will, you're talking about the second meeting on the 22nd? Yeah, that's scheduled right now. Yeah, we'll continue that. Is anyone else? Mr. Berger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to report out that yesterday I had the opportunity and the pleasure to attend the Morris Union Joint Music Festival. And I know our superintendent is on the board of ed of that district, as we are one of the, I guess, what do you call it, sponsoring districts that send it in. And it's a group of districts in Morris and Union counties. And yesterday they had their 32nd annual music festival up there. They had orchestra, 5th grade treble chorus, 6th and 8th grade mixed chorus, along with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade concert bands and the jazz band. It was something special. In addition to Mr. Berry participating as a board member for the district, Mrs. Fedschek and Mrs. Cogswell from our district, as well are on their music advisory committee. And we had about 35 to 40 students from our district that were up there for the 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. concert to put on a real nice show. It was a commitment by both the parents and the children that were participating. Practices were over a couple of months at districts, whether it be in Chatham, in Providence. The concert was in Providence yesterday at the Joint Church Board office up there in the auditorium. Kenilworth and Cranbrook were the other areas the practices were held. So I want to congratulate those 35 to 40 students, and also we do a great job here with music in our schools, all the way from elementary all the way up to high school. So just I want to report back, and I know Mr. Garrido was on that board and was a very well job. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Anyone else? Last Wednesday, I attended my first Union County Board President's meeting, and it was a meeting at the Union County Services Building. And I met with about 6 to 7 other Union County presidents from the Board of Education, their respective Board of Education, Springfield, Hillside, Galway, Berkeley Heights, and Linden. And it was interesting because I actually was talking to the president of those board presidents, which is the president of the Kenilworth Board of Education was there as well. And it was a nice roundtable together and see what every other board of education and other school districts are doing and what's happening. And what the driver was for that meeting. The driver for that meeting was basically pulling this issue that we're dealing with currently in Roselle Park, which involves the Albion School and also right here at the middle school, and getting the polling places out of these schools. Because when it's voting day and the children are here and the doors are wide open, and it's a security issue that we're dealing with. And we'd like to really, I want to resolve that. And it's a really big ball of wax that we're tackling here, but it's good to find out what other districts are doing. For instance, in Linden, I believe they were combining a couple of wards and a couple of districts all within one building. And I don't know why we can't do that here, because we have a lot of polling places for a 1 mile square town. But the point is, basically,
it's something that I like to continue on a quarterly basis, and we will be doing it. And it's just productive. It's productive for all of us at Roselle Park here to find out what's going on, and why do we have to reinvent the wheel? Somebody already else did, and the more communication, the better. And we also we're talking about other issues as far as just like these board meetings as well, and just going a little greener. But it was just a good dialogue and get to know these people. So I found it very productive, and I look forward to more meetings in the future. Thank you. With that, we are now going to go on to the principal's, or pardon me, the superintendent's report. And Mr. Rita.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm very excited that you're here today because it demonstrates to me that you're passionate about what happens here in Roselle Park and what happens in our district. I am equally passionate about educating the children, and I want to make that very clear. I do want to make two opening statements before I talk to you a little bit about our plans for full-day kindergarten. First of all, I wouldn't do anything, I would not make any decisions that would hurt any student here in Roselle Park. Never would I do that. I'm here because I have a vision that this district has incredible potential to be one of the best small secrets that we have in the state of New Jersey. I said that when I interviewed with the board, I said it at back to school nights, and I'll say it again. And I am committed to the education of the children. I want to make sure that you understand that. My second opening statement is to let you know that I'm also committed to literacy, and especially early literacy. And I also made a comment about that at the back to school nights. I am completely committed to literacy here in Roselle Park. As a matter of fact, one of my first initiatives when I came here, meeting with the administration, was to put together a literacy initiative where students read more, where parents are involved more, where reading becomes a cornerstone of education. And I truly believe that. And reading is the cornerstone to everything. Having said that, at the last board meeting, and I've been pretty much very open and being a voice for full-day kindergarten. Why? Why do we need full-day kindergarten? Well, for two reasons, and two very important reasons. Number one, although it's not a formal mandate, we are right now being pressured by the state of New Jersey and the Common Core standards and the new testing and the accountability to require a full-day kindergarten. What's happening is the state, as you know, has an accountability system. And what they're saying is if our children do not have the education beginning at the kindergarten level, okay, they would never catch up in the Common Core. They would never catch up. This is from personnel from that come directly from the state of New Jersey. They would not. We have 108 districts throughout the state that still have half-day kindergarten. There are 611 districts. We're one of 108. Those are the districts, and I've done my homework. I did survey plenty of districts. They're starting to look for ways to implement it. We know there are two reasons, okay, that not all districts have full-day kindergarten. Number one is funding, obviously, we know that. And number two is space. And almost every district has those two issues. We're not unique to that. The second reason why full day kindergarten is so important. And before I say I go into that, I did say that there are 108 districts throughout the state with half-day kindergarten. There are 6 in Union County out of 24. So we are in the minority. We are. Second reason why I feel so passionate about giving our students, our 5-year-old students, the opportunity to experience a full day kindergarten is that I am a student of education. I read as much as I can about research. I read as much as I can about new best practices, about trends in education. And the research is very clear, that students that experience full day kindergarten outpace by a very high percentage half-day kindergarten, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally. And this has a long life impact. It has. The research is out there. I read many articles that throughout the state is out there. It's out there. They do outpace. This is the reason why I feel so strongly about full-day kindergarten. As you know, our population here in Roselle Park is changing. We have an increasing number of students that English is a second language. Students that may have disabilities, students with low socioeconomic. The state continuously tells us that we need to narrow the gap. We need to narrow the gap. This is what the state is telling us. We have to, because if not, they will come in and do it for us. There have been many schools that have been identified as either school of needs of improvement or family school. And they have used one, which I don't agree with, and I'm sure you don't fully agree with it either, that have been identified based on one thing and one thing only, one test scores. That's the reality of life. It's unfortunate because there's so many good things going on in this district. But we cannot put it into a school performance report. They don't take it. When I came to Roselle Park, I also did some research. We have been doing very well in many of the areas. Our math scores are excellent. We have taken a little bit of a dip in language arts. And we can see that if you look at the last 4 or 5 years. Okay, there's no fault about teachers. The teachers are working just as hard as they have always been. They are working just as hard. The test has changed. As you know, now we have new standards. They're asking more and more of our students. So we have to make some changes. Changes is never, ever easy. We know that. We know that. We make a change at home and, we're lost for about 2 months because it's a change. Change is never easy. We looked at in discussions and I looked at all the viable options to implement a full-day kindergarten. Believe me, if I was a contractor, I will add one more room in every one of those elementary buildings. But that costs a lot of money. That costs a lot of money to add to any buildings. Those of you that have been here for years, you know what it was like for those additions to the elementary buildings years ago. It's in the millions and millions of dollars. We can't afford it. If now we'll have to cut half the staff, we'll have to cut other programs. So we can't do that. We can't do that. So what are the other viable options? Well, as I said, it hasn't been easy. I've spoken to several superintendents, I've spoken to several people around the state. And everyone is telling me, or has said, so this is not my invention. You need to, the most important thing is to find space for that has the most impact on students. We need 3 classrooms, mind you, to have a full day kindergarten. So what do we need to do? Well, I stayed up plenty of nights thinking about this. How are we going to do this? We've had conversation, I've had discussions with the administration, I've had discussions with the board. How are we going to do that? Well, we have to do something. And what I decided would be the best option is to restructure our library services. Okay, restructure the library services. Which means students will still be given an opportunity to access books just like they do using the physical space of the library. They will still have access to books. We're going to enhance and expand our classroom libraries. What we want to do is we want to rotate books also so students have different books to have opportunity. We're going to, and we're looking for space to create a book room. We're not getting rid of any of the books in any of the elementary libraries. Those books are staying in each of the buildings. We have a program called Destiny where we can make changes and find books anywhere in the building. Whether it's in the book room, whether it's in other classrooms, or so forth. Let's say 4th grade is doing a report on insects, and we need to find books on insects so they can research and they can do the work. We can find it through Destiny. Maybe it's in Mrs. Smith's room, or it's in the book room. We can find several of those books. Those books will still be there. We're also restructuring or changing our language arts program. We're going more towards a balanced literacy approach, where we're going to be building a literacy block in the classroom. Children will have more opportunity to be read to as a whole class. Students will be given more of an opportunity to read in small groups called guided reading. Students will be given more time for independent reading. So children are not going to lose the time for reading. I also met with the public library. You're very lucky. You have a wonderful town library right in the center of town. Wonderful. They have a children's center downstairs. I visited. Our plan is, and the director was all for it, she wants clientele. So parents, please visit the town library. When you have an afternoon, when you have a Saturday morning, take your children there. Okay? That's the town library. My goal for next year is to make sure that every child has a library card. We're going to be making visits to the public library. Mind you, I know there is a walk involved. Okay? The weather may not cooperate from time to time, but the director of the library and the children's library will welcome our classes in there. We don't know how often yet. We have to work out a schedule. But we'll take advantage of that. So children will have that experience. Please remember that library skills has changed over the years. Okay? Library skills has changed. Literacy remains the same. So literacy can be anywhere. It can be in a corner of your child's room. It could be in the kitchen table. It could be in a classroom. Library skills, we really don't have the Dewey Decimal System anymore like we used to. So those skills of the library has changed. So that is our restructuring of the libraries. Where's the funding coming from? Well, if we don't need the the libraries in the elementary, we need to restructure our staff. Because we need three new kindergarten teachers, or 3 teachers to replace, to be selected for the new position. So we're going to take the library positions and we're going to make them kindergarten positions, or second grade or third grade. I know the principals are working on a plan to have the best teachers in place both in kindergarten and if there is another opening. So that's the plan. We're also restructuring some of the paraprofessionals. There isn't as much of a need, okay, to have paraprofessionals for certain students. So we will be able to reduce the number of paraprofessionals so we can hire a third teacher. So we're looking at that. And that's where the funding for those 3 kindergarten positions come from. Again, this is not easy. However, we need to think of the future of the children in Roselle Park. The rest of the funding, obviously, the kindergarten classes need to be furnished. We need to purchase resources. We are in the process right now. I'm in the process of meeting with kindergarten teachers and the new teachers because I want to make sure that they get the proper training for full-day kindergarten, and there is training. I want to make sure that we have a successful kindergarten experience for our children. We have, and we are ready, it was already budgeted, and we are having another presentation on the 22nd of April, and then the public participation. You are more than welcome to come. We have budgeted for what is called a lease purchase, because we need some repair in some of the schools. I know there's a boiler that needs to be completely replaced because it's 100 years old. Obviously, it needs to be replaced. We know that we want to see our high school auditorium be upgraded because the seats and it's very old. So that is going to be part of our lease purchase. Well, the furniture for those kindergarten classes and the resources will also go into that. We're not doing anything in addition in our budget to fund the kindergarten classes. It was already built in. It was already there. I want to, once again, reinforce and reiterate that we are not, in no way, no shape, okay, cutting the library services. We restructured. This is something that was very difficult. However, as a superintendent, I need to look. I need to look, and I need to make sure that our children are being educated and are given the best opportunity. Our library, our classroom libraries, will be fully enhanced with books. Our book rooms will still be there. The children will still have access to books and will still have access to reading every day, to being read to having projects done in the classroom. Will never, as long as I'm here, will ever reduce or replace literacy in the district. And I want it to be clear. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I know if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. I did meet with several people. I met with the PTA presidents. I met with several personnel around the district. Again, change is never easy. Change is never easy, but we need to start looking ahead. We need to make sure that we educate our children. We need to make sure that we meet the accountability of the state. We have to. We have to. Because in 2 years, I may be here telling you that the state is giving us is dictating to us to do these things. I don't want that. I don't want Roselle Park to become a district that needs improvement. Never would I want that. We're better than that. the education of your children. Thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Garrido.
And now we're on to the principal's report.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we have 3 students that are being recognized for their participation in a youth art month, which was last month. We also conducted here at our building art contests, and I had every content area participate in art projects during this month. If you would like to walk around the building and see some of them, they're hanging up, and they really did a great job. We are also this month preparing for our New Jersey Yes, which will be a week after we come back home on vacation. So, or actually the second week after, the end of the month. So, those 3 students that are going to be recognized. I don't see all of them here. Risa Roca.
Risa, please stay down here. Next to Mr. Nelson. Take a good picture afterwards.
Alexis Kuterka. And Shivanji Patel is the last one. These students had their work hanging in I believe it was the PSCG building that's on Mars Avenue in Union. It's actually part of the Kane College campus. And Shivanji also had her work hanging in the State House down in Trenton. So that was a big treat for her. So thank you very much to all the students.
Thank you, Mrs. Carlin. Thank you, ladies. And, I wish I could have gone as well as you guys did when I was in your age. But, really appreciate it. And thanks for representing Roselle Park. And those who just received the awards, and you're going to receive another award in a moment, you're more than welcome to leave and do your homework if you have any homework to do. It's really exciting policy going on. Thank you again. With that, I'd like to continue with policy, and I would like someone to make a motion to approve the first reading of number 1, the district policy.
Mr. President, I'll move district policy, first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Second.
Vice President Soto? Yes. Mr. Baumann?
Yes.
Mr. Brumstein? Mr. Dan?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Harms?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Comments after the fact?
No, maybe we should explain a little bit to the public about visiting, some policy, the visiting schools.
Security is of our utmost concern, and we worked on a new policy.
As you know, we are very concerned about the safety and security of the students in the building. One of my biggest nightmares when I visit the buildings here is the entrance of each of the building and the space between the entrance and some of the main offices, especially in Sherman, because anyone who comes in through the door can go either down, upstairs, and this is something that's really has been on my mind. So what I asked the policy committee to do is to please review the policy with me, and we discuss some of the policies. And what we have done is just updating, upgrading the policy. For example, showing identification when you come into the buildings, calling or making appointments. Any deliveries, anything that comes into the building, make sure that the office knows who's coming into the building before just ringing the bell and coming in. We really felt that is something that we can do immediately, that we didn't have to wait. Something that we may revisit later on, hopefully if funding allows, maybe restructuring some of the entrances so we have a little bit better security or a better system of security in place when visitors come into the building. Again, after the Newtown shootings and every administrator and every school personnel and every parent obviously became very concerned about building entrances and how to keep visitors. We just don't know. And that's something that we take very seriously. So what we're doing is just the visitors passes. We are tightening up the policy a little bit more. You will receive a letter at the beginning of the school year, and we'll implement it at that point. So I want to thank you. And again, please follow whatever the principles, rules, and procedures are in the building. Because again, you might disagree with it, you might not like a lot of these things, but remember, it's always done for the safety and security of your children. We're very concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrido. And now on with the personnel. I would like someone to make a motion to approve agenda items 2 through 7. 2 being staff retirement, 3 being staff appointment, 4 being staff resignation, 5 being staff transfer, 2013-2014, 6 being summer camp personnel, 2014, and 7 being professional development preparation.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Holmes? I'm sorry, Mr. Dale? It's simple. Are there any questions or comments?
On number 2, I just want to add my voice of congratulations to Gina Gilchrist. It was my pleasure interacting with her both on her education level when I went to PTA meetings there. And, she's a terrific educator, and she always engendered a feeling of motivation among the students, so I congratulate her.
I also would like to add my congratulations, and it was a pleasure working with Gina for many years. As a matter of fact, we actually started here in Roselle Park the same year, and we were on the, I can
we've shared together. And it's just, I'm very proud of what she's done with that in school. The first thing was my top cleaning. It's really clean school. But also all the work that she has up there. It's just the promotion of a culture of learning and achievement. And it's just a happy atmosphere that's in that building. And, I just wanted to thank her for letting me use them also once in a while with my little team. And that was wonderful. But most importantly, I just wanted to thank her for her open and honest communication with me throughout the years as I've been on the board. I can always count on Mrs. Gilchrist for, expressing her opinion, talking to me, and sitting down in a reasonable manner, and just be open and honest. And that's how we progress, and that's how we get better at Roselle Park, is through communication. And I always agree, but I've always valued her open communication. And as a new phase of your life opens up, I wish you well, and thank you so much for representing Roselle Park and serving our children.
I do want to echo the words of the board. I've been here a short time, and as a former principal, I have to say the level of professionalism and the sign of a good building administrator is the respect and love that the teachers have for you. And I can tell you one thing, that Mrs. Gilchrist will be surely missed by her staff. Believe me, she will be. Congratulations, and you will become my interior decorator. This is the front of the office, I'll tell you. It's incredible. Congratulations, Mrs. Gilchrist.
Vice President Sobel,
Yes.
Mr. Ballmer,
Yes.
Mr. Brummerstein, Mr. Dan,
Yes.
Mr. Gerber,
Yes.
Mr. Harms, Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Vita,
Yes.
President Miller.
Yes.
On roll call, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And now we're on to education, where I would like someone to make a motion to approve agenda items number 8 through 10. 8 being educational trip requests, 9 being education programs, and 10 being the ESL Title I Summer Enrichment Program. Mr. Ballmer, Mr. Nelson, any questions or comments?
I just wanted to know about this Eric North grant. It sounds like a great idea to get this money, but what is that all about?
Is that?
That's next. Forget it.
That's coming up. We'll keep that in mind. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those items are passed. And now, we're on business. And I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda items 11 through 17. 11 being a grant application, 12 being a grant application acceptance, 13 being approval of bills, 14 being approval of minutes, 15 being secretary treasurer report, 16 being district agreement, and 17 being use of buildings and grounds. Motion? Mr. Burke? Second?
Second.
Mr. Vito, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about that one grant, about the Eric North grant.
And what was your question about that?
I just wanted to know what it involves.
What does it involve?
Mr. Bellman, the Eric North grant is through the New Jersey School Insurance Group, and it's for safety. It's a grant that I have filled out an application and applied for, and hopefully we will find out in the next couple of months if we receive that, and that money will be used to do certain items, facility items around our buildings that will make them more safe and secure.
Mr. President, item number 12, appears we're approving and accepting, approval to apply and accept the following grant from Muscle
have a letter in your packet to the effect. One of our very hardworking phys ed teachers at the high school took it upon himself, never thinking that he would stand a chance, because this is an award that's given nationally, and he was quite shocked, but we were all very pleased and would like to congratulate him for all of his efforts. That Roselle Park was one of, I think it was approximately 24 schools throughout the entire state of New Jersey that was selected by the company, I believe it's Cytosport, who makes muscle milk. And they will be using that money to do some renovation at the field house facility that the athletic program utilizes. And if you've been inside there lately, you would see that it's in sore need of some sprucing up. So we're very grateful for Mr. Hardenberg at the high school for applying for this grant. And we certainly hope that he would be willing to approve his application and acceptance simultaneously.
Any other questions or comments?
Right.
Yes.
On 17C, I introduced myself as a still past president of that organization.
Duly noted. Anyone else? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Those items are passed, and now we're on to continuing business. Mr. Green?
So far, we have 6 students who have been found living out of district and have transferred out as of April 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. And now we're on to new business. Is there anyone for new business? Seeing that there is none.
I just wanted to briefly congratulate the high school for the wonderful production they gave recently of Little Shop of Hearts. A number of board members attended. It was sold out every night, and for a good reason. Production values were strong. Our cast, your cast, our cast was terrific. Roselle Park kids, we are very proud of them, and certainly everything about it was high standard. And those who weren't there next year, definitely I encourage you to attend, because it was really an honor to be there. So congratulations, Little Shop of Hearts.
Well said, Mr. Nelson. Thank you. Anyone else? And this now, we're going to open up the second public participation portion of this meeting. If you would like to speak on any issue, please come forward and state your name, address, and what you'd like to talk about. And we can go to that point and turn around and speak. Thank you so much.
Good evening again. Jody Floyd, 429 Seton Avenue. I'm here to speak about the changes being proposed to the elementary school libraries for the next year. While I am a supporter of full-day kindergarten, and I congratulate the board on implementing the full-day program, I am also a supporter of school libraries. My family has seen firsthand the benefits of full-day kindergarten, as my son participated in a full-day kindergarten program. However, my daughter attended Aldean's half-day program last year, and it was due to the importance of literacy that was developed by both her kindergarten teacher and the library program that she was well prepared for the rigors of first grade. Libraries are such an important part of the culture of an elementary school. For some of the children in Roselle Park, it is their only weekly access to a library that they are able to take advantage of. The famous children's author Jeff Kinney, who wrote the very popular Diary of a Living Kid series, credits his success and his love of reading and books to the well-stocked library in his elementary school in Maryland. He was able to discover hundreds of different authors who inspired him. He is grateful to his school for placing such a value on books. Our own elementary libraries are home to over 7,000 books each that our students have access to on a daily basis. The next Jeff Kinney might be sitting in one of Mrs. Fox's library skill classes right now, asking to borrow a book that is housed there. My goal tonight is to urge the board to rethink the eliminating of the elementary school libraries and to be creative in funding both programs. There are many studies fundamental contributions that school libraries make to student learning outcomes. They also maintain the role of a media specialist as an important instructional partner in both supporting and expanding existing curriculum. In this day of increasing technology, school libraries play an even more important role in the lives of our children. Not only are our media specialists teaching students about books and literacy, but according to Carl Harvey, the former president of the American Association of School Librarians, they play an important role in helping students navigate through the Google world, as he calls it, being able to process the vast amounts of information that they are being presented with on the internet. One idea that might work in Roselle Park to help keep the libraries is to investigate combining them with our computer rooms and forming a media center where certified media specialists may work hand in hand with our classroom teachers and our computer teachers to both expand and develop our students' knowledge. In my opinion, a school library is made up of three components: the physical space, the centralized access to a vast amount of books that include a wide range of genre, topic, and levels, and the instruction that brings it all together for our students. While I believe we can be creative with our use of the physical space, there's no doubt that the rooms are needed for kindergarten. That goes without saying. But maybe we could look into having mobile libraries, utilizing book carts, movable bookshelves, shared spaces. When the PTOs at the elementary school sponsor our scholastic book fairs, they have mobile parks that open up that are on wheels. Possibly they could be purchased, opened up for children to visit, closed up, pushed to the side of the gym or the lunchroom. It is imperative, though, to maintain equal access for all of our students to the books and materials. While all of our classrooms do have classroom libraries, we do not have enough space in our classrooms to house the wide variety of books that are needed. In addition, students need access to many different level texts. We have fifth graders who borrow primary books to take home to practice fluency for some of our ESL students. They also bring them home to read to younger siblings. And some of our first graders love to borrow a long chapter book that can be read to them by their parents. The instruction that our children receive from the library programs is second to none. Some of the programs that our media specialists provide are developing literacy units in conjunction with classroom teachers, conducting genre studies and in-depth literacy studies that support many aspects of the Common Core, hosting library clubs for the 4th and 5th graders at lunchtime to further their knowledge and love of books. The Battle of the Books program has been reinstated for our 4th graders at Aldine through the work of Mrs. Fox and our T&G teacher, Mrs. Turpinning. Mrs. Fox is also utilizing current technology, such as the Animoto project, and connecting it to literacy for our students. She uses iPads on a weekly basis with her students. I believe that these are very critical library programs that our elementary students deserve to have. I thank you for listening to me, and I hope that the board and the community can work together to find both the space and resources to support not only a full-day kindergarten, but a full-time library program for our elementary students. Thank you.
My name is Jenny Benani Lichtenholer, B-I-N-A-G-H-I, L-I-C-H-T-E-N-W-A-L-N-E-R, 163 Berlin Street. I have a master's degree in library science. I've worked as a public and college librarian for over 10 years, and I'm also the president of the board of trustees for the Roselle Park Veterans Memorial Library. And at the last meeting, I spoke in favor of full-day kindergarten, but I really never imagined such a drastic cut to such an essential program would happen. When I heard about rumors in town, I kept dismissing them as rumor, that could never happen. I'm in complete shock to hear this proposal. While I appreciate your kind words about our public library, the public library itself is also operating at a bare bones level. Our budget, like the school districts, is limited, and I don't know if we can successfully accommodate the influx that you're suggesting. And while I'm glad that you spoke to the director of the library when it comes to the library, and I haven't seen any proposals or program suggestions for student visits, and our hours are also limited and might not work for all families. $18,000 in 3 years of my life learning how to be a professional researcher and learning how to teach children and adults how to research, how to process information, how to use those skills in their everyday lives. And they are our school media specialists, or they're, like I said, they're professional researchers and information seekers. Who will be responsible for the collection development? Who will maintain the collection? I once worked in a school library I worked in a school library in 2002 where they had a professional librarian who was so overworked that she hadn't gotten rid of a book about Prince Charles that said maybe one day he'll get married. This was in 2002. I'm curious to know who will teach the children how books are organized. We joked about the Dewey Decimal System. I'll take it. But it's not alive and well. It's an essential, it's the foundation of how books are organized, how information is organized. It's an essential organizational tool for research collections up through high school level. You said that library skills have changed. That's wrong. The fundamentals, the basic library skills have not changed. Research has not changed. Children still need help, they still need assistance determining what sources are credible and which are not. A friend of mine sent me a joke today that said, we don't need librarians, we have Google. It's the same as saying, we don't need doctors, we have WebMD. Children still need help determining what sources are credible and what are not. Any books are obsolete, books have changed. And I feel like the focus on books is wrong. The books are not important, the information is important, how the information is delivered is important. And we need librarians to help our children learn how to process information, especially in this day and age with so many overwhelming sources of information, so many sources of data. Even adults need help processing this. I worked as a college librarian with non-traditional age students, with adult students who had families, and they needed help learning what was a credible source and what was not, that you should be looking at EDU websites and not joeblow.com and learning how to determine what was important information and what was not. And especially for our elementary age students, it's just never too early to teach them how to research and process information. I could stand here all night, but I'm just going to say that I truly, truly hope this decision will be changed. I mentioned last week that my son goes to private school, and he's going to keep going to private school if this decision stands. I don't want to use the word disgusted, but I think this is a terrible, terrible decision for our town. Thank you.
Good evening, Elaine Weaver, 420 Spruce Street. Jody pretty much said almost everything I want to say. I don't know if I can say across everything. Whereas the space of the classroom is going to be for all these books, the classrooms are quite crowded to begin with. Limiting the books that the children get to read by having these book rooms and library classrooms we're only going to put 5th grade level books in a 5th grade room. And what about the 1st grader that can read a 4th grade level book? Are there parents that have to go on Destiny? I've been on Destiny. It's a wonderful site. I don't know if anyone's been on it. It's great. But I really think you're limiting the children on the books that are available to them because you can only get what's in your classroom. You can only get what's in your classroom. I agree with Jody when she said, is there any way we can make it a media center, bring computers into the library, restructuring that Mrs. Fox's programs, and I know she does insurance, and they're wonderful. I've invested 9 years of volunteer time in insurance in the library. When my son was in kindergarten, the parents started a group called the Parents of the Class of 2018. We actually held yard sales with our own private items and gave them money to insurance in the library to get new books. And this was when the school budget was not giving any money to our libraries. So I'm very passionate about our library. I do not want to see it go at all. I think there's another alternative to just having what's available in a classroom to a child, having someone actually teach the children how to choose a book, how to use different forms of media. My son in library now, we're working on a video on the iPads. So it is more, he's in 3rd grade. They're doing more, the librarian does more than just
You get books, and who's going to teach the kids what subjects they need to understand? Oh, I want to learn about science. My daughter loves science. But you just got books. Who's going to tell them, okay, this is where you can get it? We need a librarian. We don't just need books. We need a librarian to teach them that and show them what they can do and where they can get it so that they can learn more about the subjects they love. Not just in the classroom, but also with a library that has a variety. Science is a very broad subject. And you need books. You need a place, a library, and librarians who are trained to show you, hey, there's psychology, there are fiction books about science, there's things about Albert Einstein. You need a library for that. And I'm thinking, not just the library, why not combine the computers and the library together? Because libraries need computers. You can look it up on a computer, and you can also look at a book. If your computers work, you need books. You need a library. We can't get rid of it. If we do, we're limiting our students. I really believe that. My daughter loves her library. She loves the librarian there. And she wants the kid to, she said, Mommy, they're going to get rid of it? She looks so hurt. And I'm sure a lot of kids, like my daughter, will be hurt if they see they don't have a library, just a book room. Okay, they get a book room. They return the books. Who's going to make sure the books go back where they're supposed to? Who's going to make sure that those books stay preserved? Kids are kids. They need someone like a librarian and a library to keep things in order, and they can look for the subjects that they love and that they can grow and they can do better in school. So our test scores won't just show it, but they can keep it. Nobody can take it from them. All they have is a library, and they need to keep it. Please, I hope we can keep the library, not just a book room. I have a book room. My kids don't know all the books. They need a library to show them, hey, this is what we have here. This is where you can get it. Dewey Decimal System is organized, and it shows them how to do that and how to organize. That is a math skill too. That's why we need libraries, because it goes not just for reading, but it goes for every other subject. Psychology, math, physics. Literacy is worldwide. That's why we need our libraries. I don't want to see it go. Not just in elementary school, but every elementary school. This is for our future. A book room sounds nice, but I think it would be better if we had a library. Thank you very much.
Walking back and forth to the library, I'm not sure that we're going to have AEDs available. The district may need to purchase portable AEDs. Any medications that the students may have to come on these library trips. We can't ensure the safety of whether somebody in the library perhaps had a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and did it in their space. And if we have a student with an EpiPen due to a severe peanut allergy, and we come along and are at a desk where maybe there's peanut butter there, that's a huge liability
may not have as many credentials as well as people who spoke. I haven't studied library science. I'm not as well eloquently speaking as a lot of people here, but I'm a mom and a resident of Roselle Park, and I have 2 children who are about ready to enter the school system. My son will be entering kindergarten in a year and a half, so the full-day kindergarten affects him greatly. But on the same aspect, the libraries are far more important than any full-day kindergarten. We speak about the equal start, but by eliminating the library, we will have a huge disparity between any of the towns around us. We were speaking of how many schools have full-day kindergarten, and how many schools have elementary school libraries. I'm not sure what the statistic is on that, but I'm sure that most of the schools around here have elementary school libraries. Libraries are not only a collection of books, but a space where kids, on a whole, amongst their peers, learn and research other books, other topics. They develop a love for learning, a love for reading, a love for research, which if you look at, will also bring back to your STEM classes. Science, technology, English, and math. They all require a great amount of research, which is a lot of the skills that you learn in the library. But it's some ideas. I mean, I'm not familiar with the schools and their layouts because my kids have not entered the school system quite yet. But from what I've been researching online, I see some of the schools in this town have a greater teacher to student pupil ratio. If we're looking for 3 teachers in 3 spaces, as I'm not familiar again with the statistics on how about combining classes and making classes maybe slightly larger, and that from what I've seen in Cranford schools and other schools around, their student-to-teacher ratio is about 15 to 16 children per teacher. What I saw on Aldine from researching online was 9, 12, and Sherman, I believe. That these may be older numbers, but these are just what I found. But I guess back to just the idea of the library. I think it's not only good for the kids and their education, but it's also good for the town. It's definitely something that would make me think about leaving Roselle Park, which would be very far from me, because I do really like this town. My children were not able to have a library in their elementary school. It would be a great deciding factor for me to learn. I think that the elementary schools really need these libraries.
Hi, I'm Kristen Crawford, 426 Maplewood Avenue. I am a parent of an incoming kindergartner. And a couple months ago, I had a conversation with my husband saying, what are we going to do? Are we going to send my son to a private school for full-day kindergarten? Because, quite frankly, I think he needs it. I'm an educator myself, upcoming Common Core. I know what rigor is needed for kindergarten students. So I do commend you for making a decision to go with a full-day kindergarten. As I spoke last night at the PTO meeting, I said I thought that without a full-day kindergarten, we'd be doing the children of Roselle Park a disservice. So I think in that regard, it's a great decision. That being said, my son is entering kindergarten. He's going to go 6 years of being in school without entering 1 foot into a school library. I'm not okay with that. I'm really not okay with that. My son, who's in Aldine school, comes home every week with a new library book, and he talks about that book every single week. I think that we need to really go through each of the schools and to look at the spaces that are used and what they're used for, and find an alternate way to fit kindergarten in there. We were at the Aldine Library last night, as a matter of fact, for a PTO meeting. I said, this library, you could split this library in half. You can put computers on one side of that library, and you can put books on another. A librarian is such an integral part of an elementary school, and to really take that away from the students, I I think is the sad thing. If I, as an educator, have a student that comes up to me, I'm a science, math person, they have an interest in science, I can tell them exactly a great website to go to. Hey, if you like this, hey, there's a program here at the BOE Science Center. Hey, you can go for a hike. Hey, you can do this. A librarian does that, not only for science, but for every single subject in an entire school. I think that if we get rid of our elementary libraries, we would be doing a huge disservice to all the elementary students. Just think, 6 years without stepping 1 foot into a library. And I will leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Saul Kirsten, 150 Burwell Street. I guess just before we begin, will there be answers or will there be response later? Or could answers be provided now? It's pretty big.
Anyone here? Okay. If questions are asked, will answers be provided now or will be provided at a later time?
At a later date, we'll take under advisement.
Thank you. I apologize because we don't do this with a lot of people who couldn't come to the meeting ask to put things on the record. So I'll be asking them to make comments and observations. One of the questions was regarding lunchrooms. How will lunches be handled with the influx of students? The second question was enrollment. I guess it was an announcement today that enrollment began and ended. So is that done already, and are all the classes filled? Third question was regarding the review, will there be annual review of impact on youth, but also a librarian or media specialist, and the impact of the annual, every year, or 3 years. And for me, both. What would the cost be to have both programs? I know we've spoken about the 2% cap. I presume that if both are there, we'll go way over 2%, or go over 2%. What would that figure be? So people want both, and perhaps it goes to the vote, to the people they can be aware of what the cost of both is. I guess as we've spoken about already, there were some people who were concerned that the Destiny program would be done away with. I presume that is not. And another question was, how much time was given to make a decision that would have a widespread effect to over 1,000 students in 3 schools? Was it, I know the first one was that last month's meeting. And my comment is, I understand as someone who has benefited from libraries, and I love research and all that, we have a growing population of people in Roselle Park who are poor. As the years have gone by, there's a report that comes out every year that talks about reading skills, writing skills, literacy, and all those have gone down in some elementary schools. And the only thing that's gone up in relation to that are economically disadvantaged families. That's poverty. There are people who can't even eat. And I understand the principle I heard, but to have people who are poor, and books, or food and stuff, to have meals that's kind of been overlooked. And again, there could be debate about what full-day kindergarten does as opposed to half-day kindergarten. For education for a child is education for a child. And I guess the decision needs to be made, the decision that people need to understand needs to be made as far as I'm concerned is, which is more of a priority, the elimination of one class, kindergarten, in all areas of instruction, or the elimination of one area of instruction, like for all classes. I don't know the answer to that, but I just wanted to put that on the list that people should realize. And that libraries are great, and I love libraries. And more and more people came in from, and
education. How early it starts is relevant.
Hello, Andre Cole, 641 Woodland Avenue. I actually have a question, but I know you guys are going to answer questions, but I will try to just check anyway to help. Last week at the budget meeting, we talked about the possibility of hiring a grant writer for the district. I actually spoke to a grant writer, and she gave me some very interesting ideas on what the district can do to get sponsorships, not just grants. So she was actually interested in what the guideline was and what the plan was to hire this grant writer, to bring in this grant writer. We spoke, which was initially a 15-minute meeting, being speaking for 2 hours.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here again. I know you have already put in a long evening, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to try to be very succinct. As you know, school board members are the largest group of public officials statewide who are A, unpaid, but B, additionally ascribe to a code of ethics. And when I was a board member, and it's been quite a few years since I've been a board member, but you should know that going back into the 70s, this was something that the association, with the input of all of the districts across the state, created and voluntarily subscribed to. I'm still waiting for our legislative brethren to agree to live by a code of ethics. It hasn't happened yet, and I'm not holding my breath. But it's something I think you as board members should be very proud of. The School Ethics Commission is the SEC. When I taught high school social studies, I thought that was the Securities Exchange Commission, right up until the time I became a board member, and I found out it's the School Ethics Commission. You have filled out your financial disclosure forms, which are required by law. You've also probably signed an acknowledgement of the Code of Ethics, which you're required to do by law. And in the old days, boards of education just used to simply read the Code of Ethics and reorganization into the record, and that was sufficient. But with the advent of CUSAC, the new state monitoring system, they began to require an annual training, and that's really why I'm here, is to do that annual training around the Code of Ethics. So you have in front of you a packet of information, and on the right-hand side of the packet, directly behind the agenda, is a copy of the Code of Ethics. I'm not going to read that to you. You've read it. I know you're aware of it. There are some do's and don'ts around the Code of Ethics that are important, and I'd just like to sort of point out a couple of those pieces. There's a gray sheet in your packet on the right-hand side that speak to common areas of concern for board members. These have to do particularly when board members could have face a conflict of interest. And so this has to do with negotiations. If you have a family member that is employed by the district, for example, you may be conflicted out of participation in negotiations. If you were endorsed in the last election and sought the endorsement of your teachers association for election, you would be precluded from serving on negotiations for a year. If you have any personal involvement with any member that is coming before the school board in order to sign a contract with the board, in other words, you have some significant financial interest, you would be precluded out of discussion and or voting on anything that would have a financial benefit or a substantial benefit, even if it's not financial, to you as a board member. And there's not yet exact case law that defines what that significant benefit is to you as a board member. So, for example, if you have a child that is trying out for the Bachelor Singers, or mock trial, or the forensics team, or the basketball team, and they don't make it, is that a significant interest? In other words, there was a case, for example, in South Jersey, in a smaller school district where the president of the Board of Education had a child who was a special needs child. And the case held that he couldn't serve two masters. It did not involve out-of-district placement or any kind of financial remuneration to that board member.
It was about advocating for his child, about how the district was going to address the child's IEP. And the courts held that the board member could not serve two masters. And so they said either resign or you have to accept what the district is doing in reference to his child. He chose to resign from the board and then continued to advocate for his child. I'm not suggesting that that's the norm, but we don't really know what that substantial personal interest is of a board member that goes beyond the financial. It used to be solely financial. We can say there's a dividing line. If you benefit financially, you can't participate, nor should you be a board member if you have a cause of action against the district. But now that there is some case law that indicates if you have a substantial personal interest and you're a parent, where is that line? And I can't tell you where that line is exactly because I don't know. Okay? In terms of nepotism, you have a district policy on nepotism. It precludes your superintendent from recommending any member of your family for employment in the school district. And the list of relatives under the nepotism policy is hugely expanded as opposed to the list of family members for a conflict of interest. So you just need to be aware that the nepotism policy has a much broader definition around who is a family member versus who is not under the school ethics law. There's a page here on when you should recuse yourself. And my overall, if you remember nothing else that I say tonight, and I know you're tired, just remember this. Always err on the side of caution. If you think there's a potential conflict, if you think there's a reason for you not to participate in a discussion or a vote, I would recuse myself and not participate. Always err on the side of caution. If there's a topic that you know that's coming down the road that's not yet here, you can seek from the School Ethics Commission an advisory decision, but you have to know what that issue is with enough time to seek an advisory opinion. You can write to the SEC, but they only meet once a month. There are 9 members. There are citizens on that School Ethics Commission. There are board members and there are superintendents. They serve for 3-year terms. They serve at the pleasure of the governor. Some serve more than 1 term. It's currently chaired by a superintendent, but it has membership from those 3 groups, and they only meet once a month. So you have to, if you want an advisory decision, ask far enough in advance to give them time to get back to you. But they will tell you if you have a concern around whether you should participate in something that is coming. And you can always seek that advisory opinion. It doesn't cost anybody anything. You can write them a letter as a board member. If you have a concern as a board member about another board member's prospective behavior and participation, you can write and ask the Ethics Commission about that as long as you notify the other board member and make him or her aware that you are seeking an advisory opinion and have their permission to do so. Sometimes the School Ethics Commission will make an advisory opinion public if they think, while removing all names, if they believe that it has universal application to school board members all across the state. So, for example, in the last several years, the School Ethics Commission has expanded the number of board members and the definition for excluding board members from participating in superintendent search, setting terms and conditions of the superintendent's contract, and superintendent's evaluation. It used to be that you had to have a family member employed in the chain of command, meaning that you had to have a family member that reported directly to the superintendent to be excluded from those pieces. The School Ethics Commission has expanded that prohibition now so that if you just have any family member employed in any capacity on a full-time basis, you are not allowed to participate in the superintendent's evaluation in negotiating a contract or participating in a search for a new superintendent. Those advisory decisions, and there were multiples, they continued to make public so that all board members would be aware because it has universal application across the state. And so there is a sheet here on the difference between an advisory decision and a complaint. Any member of the public and a board staff member.
Advisory opinions,
Yes.
they hold equal weight to statute.
No, they do not, but I will tell you that if you receive an advisory opinion that it gives you guidance around whether to participate on an issue, and you go and it says don't, and you go ahead and participate, and then someone were to file an ethics charge against.
That could be adjudicated in administrative or
Yes, it would go to an ALJ, and they would not look favorably upon it if you had received an advisory opinion that guided you against participation if you went ahead and then participated. So,
SEC carries it away.
yes, it does. And they also have, so they have the ability to either issue a reprimand, issue a censure, suspend you from your board, or permanently remove you from your Board of Education. And they have done that. There was a circumstance where there was a board member who was a former superintendent in a district in the Deep South, no place around here, who went ahead and made a motion to hire a member, a staff member who was seconded. The former superintendent voted yes on the motion, even though the person that the board voted to appoint did not have the affirmative recommendation of the superintendent. The SEC, God bless you, removed that individual from the board. He was done. And said if they had the authority to preclude him from ever holding public office, they would do so. Because as a superintendent, he knew, the former retired superintendent, he knew that boards of education can only employ someone based on the affirmative recommendation of the superintendent. So, you can't introduce a motion as a board member to hire John Smith, and someone seconds it and you approve it. It is unlawful, because you can only hire on the recommendation of the superintendent. So they do have that authority, they have exercised it. Board members, for example, who fail to file financial disclosure forms over a period of time have been suspended from their boards until such time as they complete those financial disclosure forms. As a protection for board members, they also have the ability to fine someone who files a complaint, a frivolous complaint, up to $500. So if someone is just filing against you because they don't like the way you part your hair, or they don't like the way you vote on an issue that they may feel differently on, and they file a frivolous complaint against you because of that, they can be fined and will have to pay. And again, the SEC has done that, and they have the authority to make it stick, to fine a citizen up to $500. And they have done that more than one time. So they do have quite a bit of authority. I think it's important to know that anyone can file an ethics charge against a board member. So it's particularly important that if you have a concern or a question, which again goes back to that one thing, if you remember nothing else that I say tonight, that is err on the side of caution. You never want to give someone or give the perception that perhaps you have a conflict of interest. Even if you don't legally, sometimes the perception is enough to cause a member of the public or another board member to file a complaint against you. We do not recommend strongly that board members file ethics charges against other board members, because at the end of the day, you need to work together as a team, and if someone files an ethics charge against another board member, it's almost impossible then to come back from that and for the team to reform. And we do have some board members that spend a great deal of their time and energy filing ethics charges against one another. It doesn't play well in the public, quite frankly. They don't think you can play in the sandbox I've seen together when that happens. It's also costly to the board. Your district carries errors and omission insurance, so you are indemnified as a board member in the pursuance of your responsibilities as a board member if someone charges you with an ethics complaint. What does that mean? If someone files a complaint against you as an action you took as a member of this Board of Education, your legal costs to hire an attorney will be covered by the district's insurance. But keep in mind, there's a deductible. The more it's used, the higher that insurance cost is going to get. Now, that doesn't mean, and here's another true example, I never have to make these things up. I had a board member who went to a basketball game. His son did not get to play a sufficient amount of time, according to this board member, who was very irritated with the coach for pulling his son from the game. The board member took a swing at the coach. Okay? That board member is not indemnified, because when he took a swing at the coach, he took a swing at him as a father and a parent or a community member, not as a Board of Education member. Additionally, the SEC will not hear a case if it is being adjudicated in another jurisdiction. So in that instance, obviously the police were called, the person was arrested that took the swing for assault and battery, and then the coach sued him. So there was a criminal case, there was a civil case, and so once those were adjudicated and handled, then there was the ethics case. But the Ethics Commission will not hear anything until any other venue has been resolved, either civil or criminal, against a board member. But in that instance, he could not make the argument that he was acting either on behalf of the board or as a board member. He was acting as a parent. So that's what it means. You're not indemnified if that happens. Yes?
What about the social media? Have there been any cases involving board members and social media?
That is an area where we don't yet have definitive case law. And again, I will go back to I have one more thing that I really would like you to remember. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay? Yes, you can tweet. Yes, you can have a Facebook page. You don't give up all of your rights, your First Amendment rights to free speech as a board member. All of that being said, you have to consider how it is viewed. You cannot control who posts on your Facebook page. You can control what you put up there, but you can't control what other people put up on Facebook pages. This is an area, and I think you only have to look back a couple of weeks, and if you ask Bridget Kelly the wisdom of texting, she would probably tell you never to text anything. Keep in mind that as Board of Education members, anything that you do that's related to board business is discoverable, with those exceptions being personnel, anything that falls under the exception to the Open Public Meetings Law. Everything else, whether it's on your personal cell, your personal tablet, laptop, computer, desktop, all of that is discoverable. So if someone files an OPA request, for something that transpired in social media, your compliance officer for OPA, which I imagine is Sue, would have to go around, collect all of your phones, go through all of your text, all of your emails. You will be phoneless, tabletless, iPadless, and computerless until all of that's taken care of. Okay? So, while I understand the need to reach out, now I'm not suggesting that the district shouldn't have a Facebook page as a mechanism to communicate with the community or a Twitter account, but for individual board members, there is that risk. So, for example, we do have case law that indicates if you would like to write, for example, a letter to the editor and take a position as a board member, you can, with the following caveats, and we know this from the courts. Okay? You must identify yourself as a member of the board. You must indicate you are not speaking on behalf of the board. You may only communicate information that is accurate and public. You may not communicate anything that is closed session, confidential, or otherwise not available to the public. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So, for example, in the days past, when budgets had to be passed, and sometimes there were board members who may not have agreed with the approved budget, so they wanted to go and write letters to the editor, which are quickly becoming antiquated as we go to Facebook and Twitter. They would send letters to the paper saying, the rest of the board is crazy, they're supporting the budget, I don't support it, here's why. We had a couple of board members that communicated inaccurate numbers when they did that, and they were found to have violated the code of ethics because they communicated inaccurate information. So you can, yes, you can, as long as you, and I'm assuming the reason I'm going through this letter to the editor piece is the same thing I believe, in talking to our legal folks, would hold true for a Facebook post or any kind of whatever else is out there, because there are a lot of different sites that I don't necessarily have familiarity with. You could post on as long as you indicated you were speaking for yourself. You were not speaking on behalf of the board. The information was accurate. You weren't disclosing anything that was confidential information, that you could indeed do that. It would meet all the requirements legally. But again, I would caution you, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes?
So when I was down at the workshop last year,
Yes.
me, Bob Chin, a former board member, attended one of those 4-hour workshops on this topic. And we brought back a recommendation at that point to the different city presidents of our board. I don't know, it was really interesting. And I think maybe we should look at it again. It is a reminder that, cell phones out. One of the big principles is there should be no technology, laptops or cell phones out in board meetings. No communication, absolutely no texts, phone calls, Facebook, Twitters during the board event meeting, because it's violating whatever.
Well, it gives the appearance and the perception. I mean, you could be texting your wife, put my dinner in the oven, but the perception could be that you're texting Lauren, who then is texting Chris, who's then texting Barbara.
And it's all over right there.
It's all overable, and it gives the public the perception that indeed, you're carrying out a meeting while the meeting's going on. And the same thing is true of email when you're not in a meeting. You should never hit reply all. Email is fine as long as it's informational and it's public information. So I would never put anything in an email. I live by this. Unless you want to see it on the front page of the Star Ledger, do not put it in an email. And I know sometimes board members get very passionate and heated in how they feel because they care about education, and you may go home annoyed with another board member, and they sit down and they start typing an email. Here's my advice. I understand you may want to vent, and I get that. Then save it as a draft. Get up the next morning and hit delete. Okay? You cannot read tone in an email. If I'm already disposed to think that you don't like me, or I don't like you, you're going to read something into my words that may or may not have been there. So if I send it to Barbara, and Barbara and I get along famously, she's going to see it probably as harmless and innocuous. But if you don't like me and I don't like you and we're at each other's throats, I can send the same email with the same words and it will be interpreted completely differently because it's impossible to tell tone from an email unless you type it in all caps. I understand that shows you're angry. But just regular email between one another, informational is fine, but it should not be used to have discussions. And if you engage in a serial email where one of you emails the next one, who emails the next one, who emails the next one, pretty soon you're discussing something via email that should be done at the board table. So you're absolutely right, Troy. There are boards who have written, because this was happening, board members were sitting in closed session texting members of the community, so when they came out into open, they knew what to ask. Okay? So some boards have adopted policies that say there will be no electronic media on or available at the board table in closed session, absolutely. And I will tell you the perception is in public, it's very distracting. And I go to so many board meetings, and there are boards who call wireless, use their laptops, for the agendas and all of that. And that's fine, except if you have a crowd like you did tonight, who are very passionate, and you have a tough decision in front of you. If you're all staring at the screen, okay, and not looking at them, it's very disrespectful. And it's very disrespectful as a member, any staff member or public member to be talking to you. I mean, you all have been in meetings where somebody sits and texts the entire time you're in the meeting. It's like, excuse me, if you don't want to be here, you can go take care of whatever you need to take care So I think you just need to be attuned. A, it's discoverable, and that means someone's going to go through all your emails, some of which you really may not want Susan to read, or whoever your officer is for over in the district.
Well, what I found out down there was, so even on a company issue, cell phone BlackBerry, because we're sitting in a public meeting, and if you have your cell phone out, everything on that device is discoverable. Companies' emails, companies' records, even, confidential stuff from a company perspective.
Proprietary stuff for the company. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's why we try to come back and educate the board to not have any devices out, because you don't know what's going to happen.
I know, and it may be nothing. Truly, you could be talking to your kid, you could be writing a to-do list, whatever. But the perception may be that you are doing board business or communicating with one another, and it happens. I mean, board members have been known to do that. So, always err on the side of caution, and just because you can do it, I mean, you can have your cell phone out, you absolutely can. And I was astonished, because I've talked about this with a lot of board members, and a lot of board members will say to me, well, but what about? And I said, you can give them the superintendent's cell phone, the BA cell phone. If there's an emergency at home, you have a sick child. We did live before cell phones, okay? We did. And we survived, and I have 4 kids that survived to prove it. If there was an emergency, and periodically it did happen, I had it happen to me personally. I had a family member far away taken critically ill. They called the superintendent's cell phone, let me know right away, and I excused myself from the meeting, and that was that. So we can live without it for a couple of hours. I mean, there was a study just recently done where they actually found kids went into withdrawal. So I know we're heavily accustomed to them. We check them 1 million times a day. But when you're here, you really are an elected public official, and you're here to do the will of the public and represent every child in your district. So I would encourage you to just be careful so that it's not perceived, that you're doing something illicit. So just keep that in mind, because it's going to be an ongoing issue as to what gets texted. And I will tell you, the other piece, we were just discussing this the other day in the office, social media background checks are now becoming more the norm for districts that want to, for boards who want to employ superintendents. They're looking to have social media background checks done to see what's out there, not what's been written about a superintendent, but again, what the superintendent has posted on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or on any number of those accounts. So, what you do when you're 20 is going to be there when you're 50. Just something to think about as you're considering how you want to use social media. And there are a number of kids, who are looking for teaching jobs, and districts are routinely going to their Facebook pages and looking to see what kind of behavior is exhibited on those Facebook pages. And we might not like it, we may not feel it's just or equitable, but it's being done in industry and it's being done in education. So again, I just think it's, erring on the side of caution is always good, and just thinking before you act. I had a superintendent say to me, well, there are pictures up on my website. We were at a picnic and I had a beer in my hand, and I'm with my wife. I said, I understand that, but it's up there, so you may want to think about those things that you post. And here's the other piece. Never assume that even when you're out in public, that what you're doing is private. Okay? Because people have cell phones with cameras everywhere. So you can be dining with your spouse, you could be doing whatever it is you want to do. Someone can take a picture and post it, and you have nothing to say about it or do about it. You may not even know that it's happened until someone, points it out to you or says, gosh, Troy, do you know you're in so-and-so's Facebook page? So I just caution you. I'm not trying to make you paranoid, but I think erring on the side of caution is helpful. And it's not something I've ever thought about. We didn't grow up with it, but it's absolutely true. So keep that in mind as you're going through this. On the left-hand side of your packet, there is a host can actually go to the ethics site yourself directly, but it's easier through the BOE. And it's just, there's an FAQ around how to file a code of ethics complaint, just so that you have that information. Questions, because I know it's getting late, and I don't want to keep you here interminably late. So I thought it would be much more informative. I handed you out a 2-page white sheet that was stapled. I thought it would be much more informative to have you respond to me than for you to listen to me talk, since you already listened to all those members of the public. So I'd like to just run through this with you and have you respond and tell me if this is an ethical concern and should you do this. Is this the role of the board? A board member visiting classrooms to check on the usage of new smart boards that were recently purchased.
After hours.
Yes? No? It is. If the curriculum committee or the facilities committee would like to see the smart boards, they can ask that their administrative liaison or the superintendent, they can ask for an opportunity to see those, but board members do not go into school and routinely check on ceiling tiles, cracked floors, smart boards, the number of computers. It doesn't matter if you're looking for something positive or negative. The point is that you're here to provide oversight and to monitor the district, not to administer it. I've never met a teacher who wouldn't be delighted to have you come in and observe a class or observe how he or she is implementing the use of that smart board, but you need to arrange it through the school district. The same thing is true if you want to go in and see classrooms. I'm not saying if you're a parent you can't go to back to school night. I'm not saying you can't go to parent conferences or the science fair or something that is open to the general public. But as a board member, it takes about 15 to 30 seconds before an entire staff knows that there's a board member in the building. Literally. Okay? It does not take long. Not your role. Okay? The board adopts a hiring manual developed by a staff expert board member that's an HR professional. It includes specific interviews, forms of interviews, and evaluating candidates, spells out the roles of the CSA and other staff members. That's all right? Absolutely not. No. You're not there to hire people. You are not there to write interview questions. You are not there to administer the district. That is the responsibility of your superintendent, your educational professionals. Okay? Now, that's not to say that the board can't ask questions. Okay? There are lots of questions. So when your superintendent recommends someone for employment, there are a number of questions the board should ask. What was the process for hiring this individual? How many people applied? What did the process look like? And then your superintendent can tell you 60 people applied, they were paper screened, the interviewing committee that was made up of the elementary school principal, the second grade teacher, the library, whoever, the school nurse, pick any, you guys gotta have a sense of who's ever on that interview committee, interviewed 15 people, they then recommended another 4 be brought back for second rounds. They were interviewed by this group. They then recommended a candidate to the superintendent who interviewed them. You could ask that. That's a perfectly appropriate question. You could ask the superintendent, what is it about this individual's skill set, background, knowledge, educational experience make him or her a good match for the district? All of those are appropriate questions around personnel for the board. But the board is not there to do employment work on behalf of the board. You employ as a Board of Education one person, and that's the superintendent. You hold him or her accountable for recruiting and retaining all other staff in the district. Now you do have to approve those staff, so it is appropriate to ask all of those questions so that you are comfortable. I'm not telling you that you have to vote yes on every appointment that the superintendent makes. If you have a reason to vote no, you certainly may. The legal standard says you may vote no unless it is arbitrary or capricious. meeting. I don't like the way they part their hair, you know, something really arbitrary. You would have difficulty sustaining that no vote, but you are not obligated to vote yes. Or perhaps the superintendent is recommending someone for a job, a position that you don't believe should exist. You can vote no on that appointment. But I will tell you, you never want to be in a position where you have a candidate for a position sitting in the audience and believing they're going to be appointed and having the board vote down that recommendation. If you have difficulty with something on the personnel addendum or you have a concern, you as a board member need to notify both your board president and the superintendent, because it will make you look less than professional to have someone sitting in the audience believing that they're going to be appointed and then having the board not appoint them. You could table it to another meeting. The superintendent can say, we've postponed it, you don't need to come to this meeting, whatever, but you never want to be in that position of having someone who thinks they're going to be employed or promoted or given the stipended position sitting here and then not have that happen. Okay? It's just bad form. Yes, Arlen?
And the board as a whole interview that recommendation
As a finalist for administrative positions, I would tell you that that would be fine. A principal, a director, a supervisor. But for teaching positions, that would be micromanagement. Okay? But for administrative positions, principal and above, yes, you certainly could. And typically, supervisor, well, some districts call them different things. Assistant superintendents, directors, supervisors, principals. Okay? In other words, your top administrators of your building and or the district. And typically, they will bring you that candidate so that you can meet and greet them and get comfortable with that. That's a big decision. It's also, when it gets to be, and May 15th is rolling around rather quickly when you have to make decisions around whether to extend tenure or not. Board members should, if you have questions, let the superintendent know that when you get the non-renewal list, when you get the tenure list. Those evaluations of individuals upon which you are taking action, you are entitled to review. That would have to take place here in the district because they're personnel records and they can't go out of the district. But if you have a question about an individual that you are going to take action on, that doesn't mean your child's third grade teacher in October that you can go in and read their evaluations. Absolutely not. But if the board is voting on giving someone tenure and or not renewing them, although non-renewals are automatic, then certainly you're entitled to read that. If you had a Donaldson hearing, I would strongly recommend that you review those evaluations before the Donaldson hearing so that you have some perspective and context in which to put that Donaldson hearing, okay? And do you know what I mean by a Donaldson hearing? When someone appeals to the board because they've been non-renewed and they can request a hearing before the board, okay?
So talking about administration and higher level positions, like Barbara said, it's okay for the superintendent to bring a recommendation to you, but what about one of the committee members sitting in on a higher level, like one of the finalist interviews?
And not really appropriate because you're going to get to vote on them anyway. So you're doing it twice. Do you know what I'm saying? As a board member, you have the final say. Okay? So you'll be able to vote yes or no. It gives the board undue influence. At the end of the day, it's an administrative function. Personnel is truly an administrative function. The board does vote to approve, and I understand you want to be comfortable. Certainly, my recommendation on administrative positions is that you be given the resume and the background and information on the finalists, that they come before the board before you vote on them so that you can become comfortable, and also that you have a frank discussion with your superintendent. How many people applied? What is extraordinarily unusual about this person that they are the best person for the job? Why are you recommending him or her? What kind of educational background do they have? How does their skill set meet the needs of the district? What experience do they have in the ELL? What experience do they have in closing specific work have they done in closing achievement gaps? Whatever it is, what you're looking to fill, but you obviously shouldn't be asking those kinds of questions. That's not micromanaging. Involving yourself in the process along the chain is micromanaging.
Well, I just want to be cautious on something you said there, because you got to be careful the way you phrased it. If there is a community committee of community members, then yes, a board member can be part of that board or that committee as if invited by the superintendent, certainly.
If you were invited.
Without a conflict of interest, because and it's not just hiring, it would be any type of community committee that is put out.
Well, but personnel is a very specific category with very specific parameters around it that make it dramatically different than a community committee on.
No, but if you're setting up for instance, a strategic committee, a strategic plan committee that is going to be giving recommendations to the board, then you're saying that that's the same violation or a conflict of interest rather than on a personnel.
No, it's not what I'm saying at all. A strategic planning committee that is working with the community to make recommendations to the board, certainly the full board could go if they wanted to, if you advertised it. That's something completely different, okay? That's creating a framework for decision making. This is personnel. There are very specific laws and frameworks for governing that are different. If it's a community, Troy, if there is typically employment committees include administrators, a teacher or two, depending upon the position, perhaps a PTA member, or a parent, if they don't have an active PTA. That's not extraordinarily unusual. Board members, and those are generally done only for administrative positions, not for a sixth grade teacher.
I blame respectively that you're wrong. We can do some research and also spoke with our attorney about it. So.
And you are legally able to do. I'm not telling you can't. I'm telling you it's not a best practice. Okay? And again, there is what is, there's perception. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So if you have 3 members of a committee, on a committee with a teacher, an administrator, and a parent, actually the board is having a disproportionate impact or influence on the selection of that employee.
No, agreed. You never have to be 3 members.
Well, but see, when you just talk in general terms like that.
I think Chris's question was 8 members of the committee.
And again, a member of the board. Legally you can. I'm not telling you it's a conflict of interest. I'm not telling you it's illegal. What I'm telling you is in terms of best practice, it really doesn't, it depends, but it generally is not something that most boards and districts do. Okay? Again, I'm not saying that there's a difference between best practice and what's legal and what you can versus what you want to do. And I'm just trying to share with you best practice. I appreciate different districts do it differently. Lauren, what are you mumbling under your breath over there?
We're going to go over 23 of these things, and I think with the slide change for each one of them, we're going to be here until 1 o'clock in the morning.
I am not going to do that either. Okay? I just... Okay. Well, I can appreciate that. Okay? How about a board member call on buildings and grounds because the school floors aren't as clean as you would like them? Conflict. You need to observe the chain of command, which means, that you report those issues to the superintendent. The board directs the CSA to develop a process that engages community, staff, parents, and planning for and raising public awareness for a building referendum. Perfectly appropriate. Okay? We've already talked about that first one about the principal. Similarly, Personnel Committee recommends board member participation in employee exit interviews conducted by the district. Appropriate or not? If a board member wanted to participate in a committee that is doing exit interviews for people that have resigned employment in the district. Actually, the SEC has held that it is a violation for board members to participate in exit interviews. The only exception would be an exit interview with your superintendent because you employ him. He is your employee, so if you wanted to ask him, why he was leaving and so forth, that would be appropriate, but no other members of the staff can do that. A board member offers to intercede for his sister in a dispute with a child's study team. Absolutely not. We're not there to advocate for any one particular one. The board president responds to inaccuracies in a newspaper article and writes a corrective letter. He does not seek board approval for the letter. Not all board members agree with his corrections. As spokesman for the board, did the lack of board approval constitute private action?
He would have to state that he was not acting on behalf of the board, that he is a board member, that what he said is private, or his personal opinion.
Absolutely. So he would, if he wrote it and signed his name as board president, making a correction, be violating the code of ethics. 2 board members pay for advertising and endorsing their challenging candidates for the board. The ad includes their names and makes no effort to conceal their role as board members. No, you can do that. You can, put up a sign in your front yard. You can send out postcards. You can send out a blast email to all your friends on your email blast list saying, vote for John Smith and Harry Jones, if you chose to do that, but you should, again, indicate you're not speaking on behalf of the board. You're giving that advice as a citizen, not as a board member, but you certainly can do that. The chair of the negotiations committee accepts the endorsement for re-election by the Teachers Association. It is a conflict. It is a conflict. Now, if they endorse you and you don't ask for it, you need to contact your attorney and get clearance, But if you seek their endorsement, they endorse you, then you have to resign from the negotiations committee,
But that question is unclear because it says accepts.
If you accept the endorsement, in other words, they endorse you and you accept it and you use that and say, I've been endorsed by the Roselle Park Education Association, that's why you should vote for me, you're accepting it, If you didn't seek it and you were clear that you were not accepting their endorsement, you would check with your attorney. A board member has close ties to the high school staff, encouraging them to call her. Absolutely not. They need to go through the chain of command. Your staff knows better than to contact you. If some one of them does, you need to notify the superintendent so that appropriate action can be taken. And that would be to remind them that they need to work through their boss, their principal, whatever. The board asked the superintendent to research elementary reading programs, prepare a report to the board comparing effectiveness and cost. The board. Absolutely correct. The full board makes that decision. Only the full board has the authority to ask the superintendent to act. A board member promises a teacher, a neighbor, that he will look into a problem with a teacher and get the child moved. Conflict. That's not what you can do. The board asks the school ethics commission for an advisory opinion, identifying situations which could pose a conflict of interest for one of their seated board member whose spouse has just been elected to the town council. Absolutely fine. Personnel committee with strong support from the staff and some parents recommend the selection of candidate B for a principal, knowing that the superintendent will recommend candidate A. The personnel committee chair makes the motion to appoint candidate B at the next board meeting and gets a second. Is a roll call required? You can't do it. It doesn't matter whether there's a roll call or not. It's not recommended by the superintendent. It was. I didn't write that. But these are all these questions all come from actual cases that have gone to the School Ethics Commission. These are not things that we made up. A board member whose wife teaches in another district in the county participating in the board's discussion about contract negotiations. If you have a spouse that belongs to the same association, the same union, NJEA, would be precluded from participating in setting the parameters for a contract and negotiating a contract. The board member may vote on the final agreement as long as that final agreement includes all salary guides. Okay? So once there's a memorandum of agreement between the board and the association and all salary guides are done, you may then vote on it. Here's one of those times where you may, depending upon the community, choose to recuse yourself and not vote, because it's unlikely that you need to vote to have it passed, since you already have a committee of 3 and you really only need 1 or 2 other votes. If you know that you've been conflicted through the process and that's known through town and might cause an issue, you may want to recuse yourself. You're not legally required to. It's a perception piece. Okay? A board sharing information about candidates for superintendent during the search process with their retiring superintendent. You can, if you want to. Your superintendent has to live by the code of ethics, and so does the board. So if the board makes the decision that they want to run by their candidates by their current retiring suit, they certainly can do that. It's not illegal, as long as the board made that decision, and it's not one board member talking to the superintendent, but a board decision to discuss it. Okay? The board insists on detailed weekly updates from the high school vice principal on every student disciplinary matter. Micromanagement, okay? None of your business. You get your HIV reports, you get your violence and vandalism report. If there's something extraordinary that happens, I know your superintendent would notify you if there was an extreme event. A finance committee recommendation based on small class sizes and a tight budget says that the high school should eliminate most elective courses in music and art. It may be suicide, but you can do it, okay? You could. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do it. If you, the committee makes that recommendation, the board's not bound to adopt it, but the board committee, the finance committee, could make that recommendation and say, here's what we're suggesting to cut X number of dollars from the from the budget. The board as a whole. Because committees can only recommend to the board. Okay? So if you sat with your business administrator, your superintendent, and you need to get $1 million out of the budget.
That's right. I was trying to understand, were they in the equation of the finance committee, to understand?
They would have to be.
Yeah.
Because committees cannot meet without an administrator present, whether it's, depending upon who's assigned. So board committees should not be meeting absent an administrator, so by definition, and I should clarify that, but yes, they would be included. Perhaps they said, we want $1 million out of the budget, here's what we recommend, and the finance committee says, no, here's what we recommend. You can recommend that to the board. The board's not bound to adopt it, but you could do it. I wouldn't recommend that either, quite honestly, but you could. A board member during an executive session texting information to members of the public, we already talked about this outside waiting. Absolutely not. Okay? You don't want to be doing that. Okay? Any questions? See, Lauren, we got through that in the record time. Okay? Any questions that you have around ethics? I don't foresee that this board has a problem with any of these things. It's just a good reminder just to sort of go through it on an annual basis to talk about it. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Err on the side of caution. And if you have questions, even if it's just a perception issue, again, just recuse yourself, don't participate, and it's always the safest option. And I'm not recommending that you abstain from hard votes just because there's 60 members of the public here. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if there could be a perception that you have a conflict, it would be the time to recuse yourself. You still have to be a fully participating member of the board. Okay? There are signatures for acknowledgement of your ethics training in there. If you sign those and get those to your superintendent, they get filed with your executive county superintendent along with your financial disclosure statements. And just for the record, just so you all are comfortable, we as NJSBA staff, professional staff, sign the code of ethics and file financial disclosure statements so that you're comfortable that we're not dealing with conflicts and that we live by the code of ethics as well. So, okay. Go home, adjourn, have a good night.
With that, I have someone to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Peter. We will see you at our next scheduled board meeting on the 29th here at the Roselle Tram. But there is a budget workshop on the 22nd here at 7 o'clock.